I'd like to begin this evening's program with a brief presentation about Ezra the scribe. Let's see, I guess there he is. You see him here in a depiction reading the Torah, reading the law outside of Jerusalem, and you'll see, or inside of Jerusalem, we'll understand the significance of that in a few moments. Ezra and Confucius are interesting to compare. Here you see their relative dates and some highlights of their careers. But to situate them, it's helpful to see this timeline of the high and some of the high and low points in Chinese and Jewish history. The Jewish forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, lived around the time of the Chinese Shang dynasty. The ancient Israelites were then enslaved in Egypt and redeemed by God under the leadership of Moses, who received the Torah dictated by God at Mount Sinai. This was the most important point in Jewish history, the moment that Israelites became a nation with their acceptance of God's law. Within the first century of the Western Zhou dynasty, there were important developments in ancient Israel as well. King David established a strong monarchy, and King Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, and you can still visit that site today. During the so-called Spring and Autumn period, the Chinese Empire was fragmented. Likewise, in ancient Israel, political religious turmoil split the unified Davidic monarchy into two smaller and weaker kingdoms that were subject to invasion, and ultimately in 586 BCE, the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and the Jews were exiled to Babylonia. At that time, the memory of Jerusalem, also called Zion, became a key element of Judaism in exile, and that's the birth of Zionism, a desire to restore the ancient glory of Solomon's temple and the city of David. In 538 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus allowed the Jews to return to Judea, and the temple was rebuilt. But the Judean state was weak, because most of the Jewish people had settled in Babylonia and were reluctant to leave their new homes. 60 years later, Ezra entered the scene, and that's down here, coming to Jerusalem from Babylonia. And we can illuminate his achievements by comparison with Confucius. Confucius lived in a time of political chaos, which he blamed on moral decay, failure to adhere to the ancient Chinese traditions. Confucius spent much of his life transmitting the ancient traditions and explicating the values they embodied. Apart from his own teachings, which are recorded in the Analects, it was traditionally believed that Confucius edited the 5 Chinese classics that you see listed here. Ultimately, these Confucian classics became the core of state-sponsored learning from the Han Dynasty onward throughout China's dynastic history. Let's now turn to Ezra, about whom the rabbis said, Ra'ui haya shetinatein Torah al yado. He was worthy to have given the Torah, if not for the fact that Moses predated him. In this painting here, you see Ezra helping to fortify the walls of Jerusalem. But why did the rabbis equate Ezra with Moses? Not unlike Confucius, Ezra blamed the Jews' political weakness on their failure to adhere to the Torah of Moses, the classical Jewish heritage that was the real basis of their former glory in the heyday of Kings David and Solomon. The biblical record in Nehemia chapter 8 tells of a momentous occasion, Ezra reading the Torah in public for the entire Jewish community. And here you see another depiction of that. We saw the first one before. Now, just to move ahead for a moment, this is the passage rendered here both in English and in Chinese, where it details Ezra reading the Torah for all. And the people recognized that they had abandoned God's law and reaccepted the Torah as they did at Mount Sinai in the days of Moses. And I didn't give you the whole passage here. You can study it afterwards. But it says there, all of the Jewish people here celebrated the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and it says that Ezra was reading the Torah to them, and they didn't know it was the Jewish New Year. They didn't know it was Rosh Hashanah. The ignorance was so vast. So Ezra revived the dedication to the Torah, and the people accepted the Torah once again as they did at Mount Sinai in the days of Moses. What the Bible does not tell us, but must have been a prerequisite for this ceremonial event, was the determined effort that Ezra and his colleagues invested to instill within the Jewish people a desire to rededicate themselves to the ancient heritage. Thousands of people don't just show up when someone reads the Torah. It's because Ezra had engaged in a monumental educational campaign over the course of years that culminated in the public Torah reading. Ezra continued the educational campaign by establishing the Great Assembly, Knesset Hagdolah, according to the tradition. And together, Ezra and the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, they crystallized and edited the Hebrew Bible that we have today according to the Talmud. And now we understand why Ezra was worthy to have given the Torah no less than Moses. Moses gave the 5 books that he received from Sinai. Ezra gave us the 24 books of the Bible that we have today.